Hi, welcome to last year's look. My name is Molly, and today we're going to be talking about fall makeup. This is take 2 of this video because I looked incredibly greasy. Pro tip, if you look dewy in real life, you look greasy on camera. So what I'm going to be doing today is shopping my stash for fall makeup. I'm really excited every season to start pulling out the makeup that gives me fall vibes this season, whatever season it is. Feel inspired for the season ahead so that I have an idea of what to pull from. Today I'm just going to be going over blushes and eyeshadows. Normally I would include lipsticks as well, but I haven't bought a single new lipstick since March of 2020. And the most recent ones I did buy were discontinued. They were the Bite Beauty ones. I bought them on clearance when they made everything vegan. So there's no point in talking about a lot of things that you probably don't have and aren't able to get at this point. So I'm just going to jump right into blush and eyeshadow. I don't really change my highlighter or my contour or bronzer seasonally. Let's talk blushes first. One of my favorites year round is this Cover FX Warm Honey Blush. It's sort of a dirty peach brown shade. This time of year is a brown blush lover's dream. Like, I feel like I'm in my element. So this is just sort of a warm peach blush that looks a little more nude. And it goes with basically like any kind of fall look you want to do. I love the formula. I'm going to be pulling this one out a lot. I already have been. Next, in that same vein, an obscenely expensive blush. This is the Charlotte Tilbury blush in Pillow Talk. I'm not a Pillow Talk huge Pillow Talk fan. I only really have the lip liner other than this, but this is a really gorgeous nudie blush as well. It's peach with a touch of brown, and then there's also a peach highlighter in the center. This one is really pretty and really flattering as well. Both of these two are just really sort of flattering neutral options. Next, something a little more blingy. This is the Nabla Skin Glazing Highlight in Adults Only. I picked this up during the Ulta 21 Days of Beauty sale. I don't normally get very obsessed with blushes. I'm not the biggest blush person, but for some reason when I bought this, like, I can't stop using it. I haven't wanted to use anything else. And there's just something about the finish on the face that's really gorgeous. I have a texture, you know, I have texture on my skin. I don't find that this particularly emphasizes the texture for how shiny it is. And that copper color is just really so unique and beautiful. On my skin tone, it's a very kind of pop kind of color, but this would work on almost any skin tone, I feel like. Next is this a Japanese cream blush. I bought it on Yes Style, and it's from the brand Canmake. It's just an adorable little teeny one. It is pretty expensive, cost per ounce, but honestly, I don't really mind paying more, or paying a little less, I guess I should say. I don't really mind paying a little less for a small blush like this, knowing that you'll probably end up using it up or using most of it up before it expires. I've already made quite a dip in this because I use it all the time. And this one's more of a reddy brown color. It's, again, very neutral, very pretty. For someone who has a muted, warm undertone, it's just a very beautiful, slightly dramatic, but still incredibly wearable blush. I also like the formula of this one. It's creamy, but I don't find that it stays tacky or moves around or anything like that. And this one's a classic. This is a Clinique Cheek Pop blush. This is in the shade Roly Poly Posy, Roly Poly Rosy. I can't get this name right, either take. Roly Poly Rosy, and this is a little bit more of a cool berry from what I typically would wear, but again, once we start to get into colder months, something like this I just think looks really cute on the cheeks. Next, this is a true brown blush. I've had this one for years. It looks pretty janky, but this is the Burts Bees blush. This is the Burts Bees blush with bamboo in the This is the Burts Bees Toasted Blush. This is the Burts Bees blush with bamboo. This is the Burts Bees blush in the shade Toasted Cinnamon. I bought this ages ago because Kathleen Lights was always raving about it, and I have to say I really like this one. This is a true black brown. It's just a bit warmer than like a bronzer. It's really beautiful, especially this time of year. Again, very nude. I can't say, because it's so brown, I can't say that I reach for it year round a whole lot, but I always keep it in my collection because I always reach for it for fall. I've already worn this several times this year, and I want to continue reaching for it. The last one is a bit of an honorable mention because I have not had a chance to test it out yet, so I can't really vouch for the formula in the same way that I can with any of these others that I know wear really well. This one is the blush stick from Colourpop. This is from their new collection. It's in the shade Winona Forever. I'm not gonna lie, I bought this in part because of the name and in part because of the color. I just think that wine tone is so gorgeous. I have other slightly similar blushes, but nothing quite this really warm red shade. It's beautiful. It's what I have on my face today. And I have had other Colourpop blush sticks in the past, and I have to say that the formula is wonderful. I probably wouldn't buy a luxury blush stick at this point because these are so good and they have almost every single color. As a reminder, if you're lusting after any of these colors, ask yourself first whether you have it in your lipstick collection. I buy these because I have a problem, but it's so easy to just take your bullet lipstick and throw it on your face if it's something that you're not gonna wear as often. Moving along to eyeshadow, I have a lot of palettes to get to today. Most of the palettes I'm going to be talking about are the type of fall tones I like, which are deeper, grungier tones. But I know that right now the really popular colors are more berries, mauves, light pinks, things like that. So I have also been shopping my stash for that type of color. I don't see any reason for myself to buy a palette like the Natasha Denona Retro palette, because those tones just aren't always flattering on me. It would be me getting caught up in the trend of what's right now, when in reality, I already have those colors in other palettes. This is the Huda Beauty New Nudes palette. If you have a Huda palette, you probably have those colors because she loves pinks. And I already know that the way she formulates these, they're flattering on my complexion. Another one is the Modern Renaissance palette. I know a lot of people have decluttered this over the years. I have held on to it and have no plans to get rid of it because I think this is just such a classic color story and these tones keep showing up year after year. You might also have some of the Colourpop palettes that have those similar tones in them, and it'd be a good time to pull them out before you spend the money on a huge new palette. If mauves and berries are your thing, of course, go buy something new if you feel like it, but chances are if you want those tones but you're not quite sure whether it's warranted for you to spend the money on it, you probably do have something like that in your collection, at least if you have too much eyeshadow like I do. All right, so let's get into eyeshadow palettes. I know this is what we've all been waiting for. First, I'm going to talk about a Halloween palette. It doesn't necessarily give me fall vibes in the color story, except that it does feel very Halloween to me. This is Battybean's collab with Shroud Cosmetics. The names are all cute, like creepy movie references, handbook, spooky, apparition, Adams, things like that. This one was so hard to get a hold of for so long. I did not get this last year, and I'm really glad I didn't try to pre-order it because it turned into a little bit of a disaster. But in the end, I was able to get this one in time for Halloween this year, and I'm super excited about it. I feel like this is just a really like perfect Battybean palette. I've started playing with this a little bit since I got it, and it's very fun. I have to say that the formula is a little bit different from other formulas I'm used to. Some of the shades, like in particular Spooky, I didn't have the best luck just diffusing that as like a crease shade or a transition shade on my lid. I found that I really had to pack it on and then like softly diffuse the edge. I think that's probably pretty common with these type of pigment shades and more colorful, finicky shades like purples. But just so you know, like so far I would not be able to say that this is like one of my favorite palette formulas of all time. The colors are very Betty Jean, they're very Halloween. I just think this is a super fun one for this time of year, and it was worth the wait for me. Next, I'm going to talk about another collab. This is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Jackie Aina palette. This is just one of my favorites. The color story is so fun but so grungy. It feels very everyday wearable to me because those are the types of pops of color I like to have. This one just has really stood the test of time. I believe this one came out at the end of 2019. It's just super pretty, super fun. The textures in here are great. It has duochrome shades like this shade. Sponsored is a duochrome, a grungy duochrome, and then it has pinks and purples. So really this is one that you could pull out to make some of the like trendy looks of this moment, but maybe a little bit more vibrant. This palette is just one of the best that ABH has released in a long time. This was the last palette they released that I was just really excited about. Next, I have my all-time favorite fall palette from ABH, although the Jackie Aina is a pretty close second. Oh, it's got hair on it. It's got dog hair. Dangers of living with a dog. This is the ABH Subculture palette. Of course, this one is super old. I have not reached for this one this fall as much as I would have liked to because I've been testing out a bunch of different new things. I love this palette. It's just the original, like, cool, grungy fall vibe. I know there was a lot of controversy about the formula. I personally got along pretty well with it based on the way I put on eyeshadow anyway, which is with a little bit of a lighter hand. I had heard enough reviews by the time this came out that I knew to sort of go in delicately. Otherwise, I might have had a lot more struggles with it. But the color story is just so cool. It gives me this kind of like New York, you know, punk club scene in the 70s vibe for some reason. I don't know why. You can do so much with this, and this was the grungy green palette before grungy green palettes were cool. I don't love the formula in here. Like these funky, like shifty shades, they're like walking hard pan. They're not very good. But again, I also think that was because this came out before that type of shade was being included in palettes a lot. A lot of the older duochromes I have from mainstream brands tend to have that sort of like waxy or hard formula. So those are the only ones I really struggle with, but as a topper shade, they're fine. This bronze shade in here, it's just a boring bronze shade, but it's one of the prettiest bronze shades I own. This whole palette just makes me feel inspired. And for that reason, I will probably never get rid of it. Next is a dupe palette for a palette that was recently discontinued. This is the Alter Ego Goddess palette. This is a dupe for the Natasha Denona Gold palette. I wanted the gold palette so badly, but I saw reviews of this and people talked really positively about the formula. And I have to say, I do really agree with that. I'm not saying that this formula is comparable to Natasha Denona's formula, but if you missed out on the gold palette, this is a really good alternative. These shimmers are really beautiful. I've heard people say that they actually have issues with the creamy mattes in Natasha Denona's version of this. These are really beautiful and easy to use. I still low-key regret not getting the gold palette on some level because these are so my tones. But honestly, this palette is just so pretty and it's such a fraction of the price. Also, this is the older version of an Alter Ego palette. So all of these pans are magnetic. I can pop them out, not as easily as you'd be able to with the Natasha Denona palette, but I can use a magnet or a depotting tool and get these out and use them in my DIY palettes. So that's one of my favorite things about this. I'm sad that Alter Ego stopped doing that. I probably won't purchase from them anymore for that reason. I'm so glad I have this one. These mustard tones are just really pretty. I feel like I can get a super complete look with this. And if you have sort of a muted undertone and these type of grungy warm tones look good on you, I can't recommend this enough as like a neutral palette with a fall twist. Next, from Natasha Denona's actual brand, the Mini Gold palette. This is also just a really fun, cool fall color story. I do have to say I've consistently had some kind of issue with Natasha Denona's formula, and that's why I haven't bought more of the large palettes. That's why I didn't spring for the gold, because throughout her different iterations of formulas, some of them with the shimmers, they would crease on me really fast and they would fade. I do have deep set oily eyelids. This one, the only issue I had was that this really cool green shade right here oxidized on my skin and throughout the day turned kind of orange. It was a very strange phenomenon, but I still wear this palette anyway because it's so cool and pretty. This gold shade in the center is just like a showstopper. I feel like you can turn any look into a fall look by popping one of these colors onto it. And I really appreciate that about it. Plus there's a lot you can do with it for a 5-pan. Like I feel like a lot of 5-pans, there's just really 1 or 2 looks you can do. And this one I actually feel like there's a lot more you can do with it. So I appreciate that. The other Natasha Denona palette I have is one of the original 5-pans. So they're the bigger pan size. This is the palette in the shade 9. And this is just an all metallic eyeshadow palette. And it's all antique golds and grungy greens. This is another one where any neutral look that you do, if you use this on the lid, it's instantly gonna look grungy and fall. Plus the textures are just really special. I hope that she has reformulated these metallic shades since the time I bought this years ago. If she hasn't, I honestly wouldn't recommend picking this up just because it's so fragile. Like, this has been repressed so many times, I can't even tell you. Luckily, I've never lost a shade, but the reason the texture's all funky and ugly is because I have to keep pushing it back down into the pan again. So for the price, I don't really think it's worth it, but the textures truly are stunning. Next, I forgot about one of my ABH palettes, so I'm gonna throw this one in now. This is Soft Glam. If you own Soft Glam, pull it out. Like, it's of course a neutral palette for year round, but these types of burgundies and oranges, I just find particularly attractive in the fall. So next I'm gonna talk about a couple indie palettes. The first one is a
Sorry, I'm so sorry. So loud. I'm so loud. You're good.
So next I'm going to talk about a couple indie palettes. The first one is a Mel Thompson made me buy it. This is the Give Me Glow Vintage Rose palette. This reminds me of her every single time I use it. I really lusted after this one because the color story is so unique and gorgeous. So far, the Give Me Glow formula just seems super pretty to me as well. Particularly the shimmers. The metallic shades in here are just really gorgeous and blinding, which is what I'm looking for my makeup style. I want more glitter. This gives it. This gives texture. This gives different tones. This palette was released years ago, but really it still feels very current. It feels like the kind of things people are into now. The mattes are pretty pigmented, so I would have to say that if you're not used to that, this might not be the initial brand you want to go to. It's not the most user-friendly textures in the world because the mattes are so pigmented and the glitters are so glittery, or the shimmers are so glittery. But if you're comfortable with that, and if you don't mind that, if you don't mind doing a teeny bit of extra blending on some of these more pigmented shades, I would recommend this 1000%. It looks so romantic on the eyes, and I've never really seen anything quite like this on the market since it released. Next, I'm going to be talking about 2 older palettes from Colored Raine. The first one is discontinued. This is the Safari Raine palette, but I'm going to talk about it anyway in case you have it in your collection, or if you have similar tones to this in your collection. I love these colors because they're very interesting and grungy, but also very poppy. We have a teal, we have a couple olives. I also appreciate that this isn't overtly warm or cool. It's a mix of both in a way that's really unique and fun. So we have our orangey or gold tones, we have our green tones, and then this top row is just sort of neutrals. The shade Lioness is just a stunning gold metallic formula that looks like molten on the eyes. I have not given this nearly enough love that it deserves, so this fall I would love to pull this out and do some fall looks with this palette. Next is an even older palette from Colored Raine. This is the Queen of Hearts palette. This is another color story where it came out years ago, but I really feel like it held up to the test of time. It's sort of like a more vibrant modern renaissance. It's got an orangey red, there are several purples. This taupe is really stunning. I just feel like this is the warm palette. Like, this is a warm palette that you can do so much with. Next is a new-ish palette from Sydney Grace. They collabed with Christine of Temptalia. I love Temptalia. I read her blog almost every day. And this, out of the 3 palettes that she released, feels the most fall to me. This is the On the Horizon palette, and this is in the light version. Each palette has an option to purchase a light version or a deep version, which I love. This, I would say, is more of a palette of pops. It is a complete palette. This palette in particular, I believe, is very easy to make a complete look with, but she intentionally excluded like neutral transition shades, brow bone shades, that type of thing, because most people already have those. I like that personally, but if you're looking for like total cohesive palettes for your skin tone, these might not be the best option. But the colors that she included in here are just so beautiful for fall to me. I love this kind of mid-tone grass green. I love these kind of grungy murky blues that she put in here. These purples are stunning. I just think that this is a really nice palette to use to either do a complete colorful look, or if you're doing a neutral look, you can grab a couple of these colors and turn it into something with a little bit of a pop. Let's jump into Colourpop next. I have 4 palettes to talk about. The first one is going to be At Forest Sight by Colourpop and Raw Beauty Kristi. This is a mostly matte palette. There are 2 shimmers in here and 1 matte with metallic. These shimmers are pretty underwhelming, I have to say. So again, this one for me is more of a companion palette. Particularly the shade Evergreen, which is like a grungy green duochrome. I was very excited about that, but it's almost more of a satin. So if that's what you're going for, that's what's available in here. But to me, what makes this special is the mattes. For Colourpop, I feel like they're very pigmented. And these colors just speak fall to me because they're based on the forests in the Pacific Northwest. I love the whole theme. I'm wearing 2 of the colors on my eyes today. I'm wearing Amanita and Old Growth, the purple and the peach. And then on top of that, I have another Colourpop eyeshadow. It's a Super Shock shadow in the shade Set to Stun. It's a very beautiful, just glittery rose shade. And then I have a teeny bit of Stila Kitten Karma patted on the inside of my lid. This is a really gorgeous, versatile matte palette, and I think it just goes to show that you really just need a couple pops of color to make a really gorgeous berry toned eye look. The next palette is an IP collab that Colourpop did. This is the Star Wars The Child palette from Colourpop. I love The Mandalorian, but that's not necessarily why I purchased this, although the baby Yoda on the cover is really adorable. I probably wouldn't have bought it if the color story wasn't also so appealing to me. This is basically an entire palette of mostly like swampy greens. This shade here, what's it called? Precious Cargo, is a Super Shock shadow with a green gold flip. And then you have a True Gold, deepening shades. This brown has a bit of an olive undertone. This is a very pretty shade. This is a very pretty palette, and I think for someone with a light skin tone, if you're a little bit afraid to go into something like Subculture, this is a good sort of like gateway green palette. Now, another matte palette I have, this is the little Ray of Sunshine palette from Colourpop. This is an all matte yellow toned palette. This for me is like what I wanted Urban Decay Naked Honey to be minus the shimmers, because these tones are just more golden and, in my opinion, a little more unique. I wasn't that interested in this palette when I first saw it because it looks like it's just like a row of whites, some yellows, and then some browns. But really, on the eyes, and once you swatch these, almost everything has a very distinctive yellow undertone. This shade, this yellow shade in the middle, is a very pretty pop of color. The formula is really good on this. This is more similar to the Raw Beauty Kristi palette, where it's a little bit powdery and a little bit more pigmented than some of their other palettes. I've had no issues with these. This is like, for someone with my skin tone, or undertone, I guess I should say, this is like a really perfect neutral palette for me. And the colors do look particularly fall to me. The last palette I have from Colourpop is the oldest palette in my collection altogether. It is the Yes Please palette. This came out years ago. It was a loose dupe of the Natasha Denona Sunset palette, and to me this color story still holds up. I know a lot of people are a little bit tired of this traditional kind of sunset color story, where it's like oranges, yellows, very typical fall colors in a very, you know, standard kind of way. But I think there's a lot of room for that, and I pulled this out recently because I was trying to decide if I wanted to get rid of it because it's just so old. And after I did a couple looks with it, I thought, no way do I want to get rid of this, because First of all, I can depot all these shadows if I'm making my own fall color story with a magnetic tool. And it's just nice to have something like this. Do I want a million palettes of these kind of traditional oranges? No, but it's super nice to have. Next, I have one from Urban Decay. This is the Stoned Vibes palette. I am not going to say that this is the best formula of this type that I have. It's certainly not. This is the same kind of marbled formula that you're going to find in a lot of Huda's larger palettes. It is really pretty on the eyes once you get it to work, but I don't think they did the best job in terms of making it buildable. A couple of these shades are just sort of in permanent state of hard pan. Raw Energy, Meditate, and Vibes all have quite a bit of hard pan in them, and they were that way kind of to start. So you have to dig into them a little bit. I bought this at half price. I waited for this to go until it was about $20. For $20, this is a really nice purchase of a palette of pops, but I would absolutely not buy this or really any other Urban Decay palette at full price because I just don't think the formulations these days are particularly worth it. The formula in here isn't great, but the tones are really special. This blue shade Ojo and this green shade Jade. A lot of these are just gorgeous when you pack them over something else. I just either use a thumbnail or a fingernail to scrape up a little bit or a stiffer brush to get in there. I have 4 satin or matte shades. Those are a little bit beside the point. 2 of them are quite light, which I don't really understand, but these 2 deeper shades, there's the shade Hexed, which is more of a pretty warm brown. I like the tone of that one a lot. And then Third Eye is a satin. I don't mind having a satin in the crease, but for a lot of people, maybe these wouldn't be the most versatile shades. This next palette is a real fall staple for me. This is the Melt Gemini palette. This is just a perfect grungy toned dream to me. These mattes are just some of my favorite neutrals year round on my skin tone, but in fall, they're especially perfect. It ranges from mustard to army green, and then you have this little warm section over here, but it's also quite grungy, so they pair perfectly with these green tones. The only thing I would have to say that I don't like about this palette, similarly with the Raw Beauty Christie, there are only 2 shimmers in here, and those shimmers are not especially good. This shade Goals, the green, is fine, but this shade Gemini is another one that has permanent hard pan. And unlike the Stoned Vibes palette, it's not really worth the struggle to get it to, you know, to pay off. It just looks kind of generic, and I'm not sure why it's formulated so badly, why it's so stiff. I would say that this is definitely a brand that can be a little bit inconsistent in terms of what you're getting. This is the only palette of theirs I own that I can speak to, but from what I've seen from other people. But I like that there's a really nice, pretty matte black in here. And this shade Fire OG is just incredibly unique to my collection. Actually, both of these, Mochi and Fire OG, these 2 on the end, are incredibly unique to my collection somehow, even though I have so much makeup. The last palette I'm going to talk about is one of my most expensive. This is my Pat McGrath Bronze Seduction palette, and this is one that's really going to stay a staple from now until the holidays, because you can see that while these are perfect fall tones, they're also like perfect Christmas tones. There's a lot of crossover in those types of palettes. This one has 4 of her special shades in it. This red, this like holiday Christmas red, is incredibly perfect. This bronze isn't one of her special shades, but it has a really beautiful shimmer to it. This rose gold from her is one of my favorite rose golds I own. And then these 2 shifty shades on the end, I honestly pull this palette out all the time when I'm using something else, just so I can put these on the lid. And something about the tone of them gives me that perfect kind of duochrome fall look. It takes another look and makes it very special. So this is mostly about my palettes, but let's talk single shadows real quick. I know single shadows aren't for everyone, but if you're someone who likes to kind of do your own thing, be able to dupe other palettes or dupe the vibes of other palettes, I do really like having singles in my collection. So because so many of my palettes, so many of my fall palettes are really matte heavy, I put together a collection of my own singles that I think really capture that fall moment. Some of these you can't purchase individually because they're depotted from Juvia's Place palettes. These 2 greens are depots, but most of these are single shadows. Some of them are also colored Raine shadows that are discontinued. But again, it's really about picking out the shades that feel fall to you. The ones I'm most excited about right now are some new ones I got from Terra Moons. I got some really pretty duochromes and multi-chromes. This is the shade Big Bang right here. This is a purple green flip that I just think is really cool. It gives me this kind of like snake chameleon moment. This is the shade Hot Spice Cider. That one is probably the most fall of all the ones that I purchased because it is like a red base with a green gold shift. That is just super pretty. It transforms anything you put it on. I also have some shades from JD Glow in here. The ones that are available to purchase individually, I'll link them down below. But I've been really enjoying having this as a companion palette because it speaks. But I've really been enjoying having this as a companion palette because it runs from gold shades to warm greens, and then down at the bottom here I have some cool greens, dark blues, things like that. So I feel like I have a real variety of fall metallic eyeshadows here. I also pulled out a few of my special glimmery top coats, the kinds that come in pots. Most of mine are very fall appropriate, but I picked out a couple that were really unique. This is the shade Twisted. It's the shade Twisted from Ciate London. It's like a blackened green. It's that same type of formula that's in the Urban Decay Stone Vibes and also in the Huda New Nude palette. Another one from that same line is the shade Phoenix from Ciate London. This is a pinky red. This is a pinky red. From the brand Touch and Soul, which is a Korean brand, I have two different eyeshadows. This one is the shade Sun Aurora. This is a green gold shift. It's similar to the one in my Pat McGrath palette. Not exactly in formula, they're very different formulas. That baked special shade formula from Pat is incredibly unique, but you can get that same type of shift in maybe even a more metallic, shiny way with this. The second one I have from Touch and Soul is this shade Hollow Mulberry. This is another one of those tones that I really love that just has that red base and purple and green, brown, a bunch of different shimmers and reflects in there. It looks really grungy, super fall to me. So that wraps things up for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you're feeling inspired to look through what you own and pick out the things that you'd like to use for this season. I hope you'll consider subscribing and checking me out again. And until next time.